Welcome, I'm Dr. Tom Warren and you're watching The Plant Doctor. What we're going over today are perennials that can take a lot of sun and a lot of heat. The first one we have here is Daylily. One of the things I like about daylilies is the variety of colors that you can have on flowers. You can have yellows, you can have reds, you can have oranges or anything in between. Another good thing about daylilies is it's one of those plants you can stick in the ground and almost forget about. You need to water it those first few months when you put it in, but once those roots are established, you can almost forget about it. USDA zones 4 through 9, so our friends pretty far north can grow this as well, and it'll grow all the way down into Florida and South Texas and Louisiana and some of those states that just cook in the summertime. But a great plant for full sun in hot conditions, daylily. The next one here is Liatris. So Liatris is a bulb, and it's USDA zones 3 through 8, but what I found out here, I planted these about 3 years ago, and every year I have fewer and fewer come back up. I'm on the extreme southern end of this. I think it gets a little bit too hot where I'm at for these bulbs to survive. If you were, say, a line that's, we're gonna call it Chattanooga, Charlotte, over towards Oklahoma City north, I think this is a really good option for you. It's just a really cool plant. It has very narrow leaves, has these terminal ends that have flowers on them. You can see here, this one is getting ready to flower. So it flowers in midsummer, all different flower colors. These are going to be purple, but there's reds, there's yellows, there's all different colors of these. They're going to get about 2 feet tall, and the pollinators just love this. When this opens up, it's gonna be covered up with bees and butterflies. This is Liatris. This is Sedum Autumn Joy. This is another one of those plants I feel like you can just stick in the ground and forget about, mainly because of these very waxy leaves. Holds in water really well. So you water it a couple times, it's pretty much established. This is a rather large one. I've had it for several years now. You can see it gets wider than it does tall, so it's probably about 3 feet wide, and it might be 2.5 feet tall. The reason I like this one so much is it blooms in the fall. This is Autumn Joy, so Sedum Autumn Joy. So as most of my perennials are falling off, they're getting ready to go to sleep, this is just gonna be covered in a mat of flowers. And so it gives those pollinators that last little bit of nectar before we start to get cold. But I feel as if almost every perennial garden should have this because of that factor. It's that late bloomer that's gonna give some flowers to the garden so we get the aesthetic appeal, but we're also helping out the pollinators as they're getting ready to go into their hives for winter. Echinacea purpurea, or purple coneflower. This one is abnormally tall. If you watch the channel, you know my yard here is half landscape, half science experiment. We breed daylilies. I've been breeding Echinacea, and this is one that I've bred. I bred it for height, but also to have a stem diameter that's thick enough to hold it over in strong winds. We've had several strong thunderstorms come through this year, and this has not been blown over. I've grown some tall before, and they've just blown over, but this one has not. I'm right at 6 foot tall. You can see this one's taller than me, even with the hat on. So this one's like 6.5 feet tall. But most of the time, they're gonna be in that 3 to 4 foot range. This one's a freak. Coneflowers have been bred to have a bunch of different colors on the flowers. Traditionally, you have a pinkish purple flower, but there's cultivars out there like Echinacea Powwow, Cheyenne Spirit that have different color flowers. This is a native that can be found all over the United States. USDA zones 3 through 8 on Echinacea. This one can grow in some pretty cold conditions. It will die all the way back to the ground. Unlike some of the other ones that we've looked at, you'll have some greenery throughout the year, even if it's just a little bit. This one will die all the way back to the ground, but it comes back. Another great feature about Echinacea is this. Not only is it a pollinator, so the bees and the butterflies love it, in the fall of the year, the birds stand on top of the flower heads and eat the seeds out of them, in particular American finch. It's really fun to sit on the back patio here and watch the birds fly in and out and pick the seeds off. It seems like the hotter it gets, the better this one does. This is Rudbeckia, or black-eyed Susan. It's just now starting to bloom for me. and here in mid-June. So around the 4th of July, this one's in full bloom, and it's going to have so many yellow flowers across the top you can hardly see the green vegetation. This particular cultivar is Goldstrom, and it's going to get about 3 feet tall when it blooms. But it can take over. I do find myself having to kind of come in with a shovel and dig around to keep it in the area that I want to keep it in. It'll outcompete some of the other things I have around it, like the purple salvia. This flower plays really well with that purple salvia. That bright yellow and that vibrant purple is just a really nice combination in the garden. USDA zones 4 through 8 on Rudbeckia. Perhaps my favorite perennial in my garden is going to be Salvia May Night. I know it's a common perennial. A lot of you guys already know about this plant, but it starts blooming for me in April and it goes well into the summer. We're at June the 16th today and it's still blooming really profusely. You can also go in and prune off the spent flowers and it'll rebloom for you. This will bloom for me well into September if I just go in and cut off the spent flower heads. Just a great plant. Doesn't get very tall. We're going to call it 2 feet tall. Gets wider than it does tall. These can get 5-6 feet around. This one's several years old, but it loves full sun. It loves dry conditions. USDA zones 4 through 8. If you're in zone 8 and you have a mild winter, this one will actually not go completely dormant on you. I've had mild winters here where I'm at, and even in December and January, there'll be a little bit of vegetation up on top of the ground. So you'll have some greenery here in the garden when everything else is asleep. Just a great plant, Salvia May Night. A companion plant for Daylily that'll take the same conditions as Daylily will, those hot, dry conditions, very sunny conditions, and blooms at the same time, is Pervaskia, or Russian sage. This one has a purple flower. They can get anywhere from about a foot tall all the way up to 5 or 6 feet tall, depending on the cultivar. This one here in front of us is also Pervaskia, but it has more of a white flower, and it's also a dwarf one as well. So this one's tall, the one in front of it's dwarf. USDA zones 3 through 9, so you can grow this really far north. This is also probably my most drought tolerant plant in my perennial garden. This is a plant that you can stick in the ground and almost not water it at all the day you plant it. As long as you're getting rain like once every week to 2 weeks, 7 to 14 days, this guy's gonna be happy. Russian sage. This may be the most important plant in this garden. This is milkweed. Monarch butterflies have to have milkweed in order to complete their life cycle. So I intentionally put milkweed in here, but it meets the requirements that we're talking about in this video. Full sun, hot, dry conditions. This plant is going to be a native all across the United States. USDA zones 4 through 9. You're going to find this plant in the wild in almost any state, especially in the eastern half of the United States. This plant doesn't get very tall. I've had this one for several years. It might get up to 3 feet tall. It's about 2 feet tall right now. It's going to get as wide as it does tall. So this one's around 2 by 2. So it takes up a lot of space in terms of width in the garden as well, which is nice. I love the orange flowers. They complement well with that plant we just talked about, Russian sage. So you've got these nice purples playing off these oranges down here. The bees, the butterflies, the moths, they love this plant, milkweed. Guys, as always, thank you for watching The Plant Doctor. And until next time, happy gardening.